Your alarm goes off and you already feel tired. You have 40 minutes before you need to leave for work. You eat something fast. You scroll something fast. You leave fast. Somewhere between your front door and your desk, you start counting down to the weekend. This is the rhythm you call normal. Wake, work, wait, repeat. But for almost the entire span of human existence, this rhythm did not exist. Your ancestors did not have a 9 to 5. They did not have a boss, a clock, or a commute. And the strange part isn't that they had no jobs. The strange part is what they did instead, and how little of their day it actually took. Chapter 1. The Myth of the Exhausting Hunt. Picture a hunter-gatherer, and your brain probably shows you something exhausting. A spear in hand, sweat on the brow, a desperate chase across a hot, dry plain. Survival, you assume, must have been a full-time job. You picture danger every hour and hunger always one step behind. This image did not come from nowhere. Generations of textbooks described early human life as a constant struggle against starvation. Documentaries reinforced it, films exaggerated it even further. The phrase survival of the fittest somehow got attached to a picture of grinding, non-stop labor. That image feels obvious. It is also almost completely wrong. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Richard Lee traveled into the Kalahari Desert to study a group of hunter-gatherers called the hoansi. He expected to find a population working desperately just to stay alive. Instead, he found something that did not fit the story at all. By his measurements, adults spent around 15 to 20 hours a week obtaining food. 15 to 20 hours. That is less than half of a standard work week today. Think about that the next time you complain about a 40-hour week. So if they were not hunting and gathering for 8 hours a day, every single day, what were they doing with the rest of their time? That question barely gets asked outside of academic papers. But once you ask it, you cannot really stop thinking about it. Because the answer says something uncomfortable about the life you are living right now. That question is the one almost nobody asks, and the answer is about to change how you see your own schedule. Chapter 2. The Original Affluent Society. A few years after Lee published his findings, an anthropologist named Marshall Sahlins gave this idea a name. He called hunter-gatherer life the Original Affluent Society. Not affluent in the sense of owning things. Affluent in the sense of having enough and having time left over. Sahlins argued that scarcity is not really a fact of nature. It is a relationship between wants and means. A farmer with 10 fields and the ambition for 20 feels poor. A forager with simple wants and a forest full of food feels rich. You were probably taught that civilization rescued humanity from a desperate, hungry past. The data Lee collected suggested something closer to the opposite. Hunger existed, certainly, especially during droughts or unusually harsh seasons. But day to day, for most of the year, your ancient ancestors had more unstructured time than you have right now. Sit with that for a second. More time. Fewer possessions. Less anxiety about scarcity. So what do you think they filled all of that time with? Here is where it gets uncomfortable, because the answer sounds a lot like leisure. The exact kind of leisure you feel guilty taking. Chapter 3. A day with no jobs. Strip away the 8-hour workday and a strange kind of day appears in its place. Morning might begin slowly. No alarm, no rush. A short walk to check snares or dig roots. A conversation along the way. By midday, the food needed for that day is often already gathered. And then, nothing scheduled, nothing urgent, no inbox waiting to be answered. The anthropologist James Suzman, who spent years living with and studying the same Jew/Hoansi communities decades after Lee, described this unstructured time as filled with rest, storytelling, gossip, music, and long stretches of simply sitting together. Not laziness, not boredom. Something closer to what you might call free time, if you ever had enough of it to notice what it actually felt like. Naps were common in the heat of the afternoon. Long conversations stretched into the evening. Children learned by watching and playing rather than sitting at a desk. There was no concept of clocking in. There was no concept of being behind on anything. Your body evolved expecting exactly this rhythm. Work in short bursts, rest in long stretches, repeat. Does any part of that sound like you're weak? Probably not. And that gap between what your body expects and what your calendar demands does not just feel inconvenient. It feels, somewhere deep down, wrong. That gap between what your body expects and what your calendar demands is exactly where the discomfort starts, and it only gets stranger from here. Chapter 4. Then, everything got harder. If foraging required so little time, you might expect agriculture to free up even more of it. It did the opposite. When humans began farming, somewhere around 10,000 years ago, something unexpected happened to the average workday. It got longer. Much longer. Crops do not plant, weed, and harvest themselves on a schedule that suits anyone's need for rest. They demand labor at specific times, in specific amounts, whether your body is ready or not. A field left untended for a week can fail. A herd left unwatched can wander or be lost. The flexible, bursty schedule of foraging life gave way to something rigid, seasonal, and unforgiving. Skeletal remains from early farming populations show increased signs of physical strain compared to the foraging populations that came before them. Average height even decreased in several regions after the shift to agriculture, a signal researchers often link to poorer nutrition and harder, more repetitive labor. The biologist and writer Jared Diamond once called the adoption of agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race. Not because farming failed, but because of what it quietly cost the average person's daily life. More food stored for longer, less time spent freely. So why did humans keep choosing it, generation after generation? The honest answer says less about ancient humans and more about the world you happen to be sitting in right now. Chapter 5. The trade. Nobody voted for farming produced surplus. Surplus produced storage. Storage produced ownership, and ownership produced something foraging bands rarely needed in the same way: hierarchy. Once food could be stockpiled, some people controlled more of it than others. Once some people controlled more, others eventually had to work for them in order to eat. Archaeologists studying the earliest farming settlements have found growing differences in house size, grave goods, and access to resources, evidence of inequality that simply does not show up in the same way at older foraging sites. The structure widened slowly, generation by generation, until working for someone else's surplus became the default condition of being human. You did not choose the 9 to 5. Neither did your grandparents or theirs. You inherited a system that traces back to the moment food stopped being shared freely and started being owned. None of this means agriculture was a pure mistake. It eventually built cities, writing, medicine, and almost everything you rely on today. It also quietly rewired how much of your one life gets spent earning the right to keep living it. Your ancestors were not lazy. They were efficient in a way modern life rarely lets you be. Are you? Here is the twist almost nobody mentions when they romanticize the past. That free time was never really empty. Chapter 6. Free time was never empty. Hunter-gatherer, leisure was not passive. It was not scrolling. It was not staring at a screen waiting for something to happen. It was dense with connection. Storytelling carried history, law, and warning, all without a single written word. Music and ritual marked the passage of seasons, of grief, of new adulthood. Skill sharing, teaching a child to track, to weave, to read weather in the sky, filled hours you might now dismiss as unproductive. Even arguments and gossip served a purpose. They aired tension before it could curdle into something worse in a group where everyone depended on everyone else to survive the next bad season. Researchers studying contemporary foraging societies have repeatedly found that this kind of downtime functions as social glue, not waste. It builds trust between people who depend on each other. It resolves conflict before it escalates into something dangerous. It keeps a small, interdependent group able to survive together through hard seasons. Your free time today often does the opposite of that. It isolates you in front of a private screen instead of gathering you around a shared fire. You can have an entire evening of leisure and end it feeling lonelier than when it started. So maybe the problem was never having free time in the first place. Maybe the problem is what fills it now. And that brings you right back to the question. This all started with, except now it is not really about them anymore. It is about you. Chapter 7. What this means for the life you are living. You were never built for an 8-hour desk shift followed by a 45-minute commute. Your brain evolved for bursts of effort followed by long stretches of rest, conversation, and shared attention. That mismatch is not a personal failure. It is a structural one, 10,000 years in the making. Knowing this will not get you out of your job tomorrow morning, but it might change how you treat your evening, your weekend, the 20 unscheduled minutes you usually fill with your phone instead of an actual conversation. It might change how guilty you feel the next time you do nothing for an entire hour. Doing nothing was not a failure of ambition for your ancestors. It was the entire point of a day well spent. Rest was not something they earned after enough hours of labor. It was simply part of being alive. Your ancestors did not have jobs. They had something closer to a life with built-in rest, woven into the rhythm of every single day. You have jobs. What you choose to do with the hours outside them is the closest thing you have left to that ancient freedom. Spend it the way they would have. With people, not just with a screen. So tomorrow, when your alarm goes off and you already feel tired, remember this. You are not lazy for wanting rest. You are remembering something your body never forgot.